looking at Matthew 24. We looked at the previous, verses 1 through 15 really last week, 1 through 14 specifically. Today we'll look a little closer at verse 15. You may remember that Jesus is on his way out of Jerusalem with his disciples, and he had some interaction there with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law at the synagogue and in Jerusalem, and had some conflict, a lot of woes in chapter 23 of Matthew. They come out of Jerusalem, they go over to the Mount of Olives, they turn around and they look at Jerusalem, at Mount of Olives, where they were standing a little bit higher than where the temple was. They're kind of looking down towards the temple in the distance there, and the disciples they're just joyful. Look at the magnificence of that architectural structure. It's a symbol of how God is so pleased with us, His people. Yes, we've had difficulties, we've had failings. We are now under Roman occupation, but look at it. Isn't it wonderful, Jesus? And Jesus surprises them by saying that there will be not even one stone that will not be thrown down. He says in verse 2 of chapter 24, you see all of these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Well, that sparks questions, of course, and the disciples want to know some questions. A lot of us would want to ask, but they, of course, would want to know, when will this be? When is this going to be that the temple is going to be destroyed? How would that be possible? It's so magnificent, so large. The stones are so huge. Who could do such a thing? When is that going to happen? And what will be the sign that this is going to happen? And what will be the sign of your coming, by the way? They've already tapped into that Jesus is going to leave for some time. And what will be the sign of you coming? What will be the sign of this temple being destroyed? Because the temple is supposed to be a symbol of God's blessing on the people, how the people interact with God. What about these things? When are these things going to take place? And that's what Jesus is dealing with here in Matthew 24, particularly in these first verses. Today I'll start at verse 15, Matthew chapter 24. So, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand, so if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and He will send out His angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather His elect from the four winds and from one end of heaven to the other. That's a lot of drama. That's a lot of action right there in the inspired Word of God. If we were to look at this passage, all of Matthew 24 actually, but particularly this section, if we were to take away a big idea from this passage, the big idea we could summarize would be this. There are two signs being spoken of here. Two signs. There's the sign of the abomination of desolation, and then there's the sign of the coming of Christ. Two signs Jesus is talking about here. As a practical matter, in the course of time, there's not that much time difference between them. But there are two signs. There's the one, the abomination of desolation in the temple, and the other one, well, it is a catastrophic event that is happening. In fact, there's all kinds of spectacular cosmic phenomenon going on. No one will miss the coming of Jesus Christ. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. That ought to give somebody a heads up. And the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven. Wow, how could that be? Well, the one who established the stars in heaven can make them fall from heaven. That's not hard to grasp. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in the heaven the sign. There you go. The sign of the Son of Man, and all of the tribes of earth will mourn. Not one person on this earth will miss it. How is He going to do that? Other than the cosmic signs? Well, I don't know. But Jesus says all of this phenomena is going to happen. And when that happens, whether it's in an instant or whether it's in the matter of a few hours, no one is going to miss it. So that's the sign of His coming. You won't have to look too hard. It'll be very clear to you. Big idea, two signs. And then Jesus talks about this abomination of desolation being set up in the temple. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, well, where is the holy place? Well, the holy place, the temple, is the holy place, the Holy of Holies. The temple had the holy place and the Holy of Holies. But when you see the abomination in the holy place, he's not talking about the nation, the holy place, the nation. He's not talking about the city. It's very specific. When He's standing in the holy place, when He's in that sacred place, well, you'll know that things are unfolding. They're going to start unfolding real fast. That's not the sign of the coming of Jesus, but that sign's going to be coming real quickly. When you see that sign, something very special is going to happen. Something very special is going to happen. Now, something very straightforward. Mentioned it last week, connecting to this week. There's an assumption in this verse. And you already know what the assumption is. There's got to be a temple. He's talking to Jews, and He's talking about Jerusalem, and there needs to be a temple in Jerusalem. Uh-oh. That's going to be an interesting thing. How will that take place? Hard for anyone to imagine how that will take place in the times that we live in. But Jesus is saying that it will take place. The abomination spoken of the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place. So there has to be a holy place. So there has to be a temple in Jerusalem. And, well, we don't have to reach too far in our thinking. You may have heard of some construction projects recently. If the powers that be want to assemble workers by the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands, it won't take too long to build something. Even today, when the powers that be want to get away, all the bureaucracy is out of the way, and especially if there's one ruler in the world, all the bureaucracy is out of the way. The attention of the world is on this leader or this group of people. However that's going to come about, it won't take very long to build the temple. I don't know how God's going to do that. I'm not saying that it's going to happen in a second or an hour or how long it's going to take. But it will happen on the place where the Dome of the Rock sits today. That's going to take a wonderful, powerful work, a supernatural work. But according to the Lord Jesus Christ, that's what we're talking about here. There has to be a temple. You know, you look at these things like this, maybe you do, I don't know if you do or not, but what difference does it make really? As long as I'm saved, as long as I've accepted Jesus Christ and my sins are forgiven and I'm given the assurance that I'm going to go to heaven, what difference does all of this make? Do I have to know all of this to go to heaven? No. But it'll help you love the one who promises you that you're going to go to heaven. That'd be like saying to a family member, do I really need to know all that about them, that health problem they have? Do I really need to know all that? Well, that's real loving and kind. Gosh, that's nice. I don't know. All that prophecy in the Bible, of course, a large proportion of the Bible is prophecy. We're just grazing across the top now. A large portion of the Bible is prophecy. I have to know all that? No. You don't have to know that they're a health problem to love them and to be a family member with them. But if you knew something about the challenges that they're going through, you might have some greater sympathy and you might have a greater passion for them and you might have greater devotion to them and you might have a greater appreciation for what they do day to day just to exist in this world with the suffering that they go through. You know them better. Prophecy helps us know Jesus Christ better. So what difference does it make? It helps us become better worshipers, better disciples, better equipped to deal with the world that we live in today. So Jesus is describing really a terrifying future event. Now there have been many try to just discount this whole thing, and they don't even go into the book. Churches don't even go into the book of Revelation. Don't even try to attempt to deal with prophecy. It's not easy. We all know that and can appreciate it. They don't even try to attempt it. But that's a big mistake. Jesus is describing a future event that is going to be terrifying for anyone that is not a disciple of His. If a person dies before all of this happens and they're not a disciple of Him, well, they've already entered into their terror, a portion of it. Those who are alive, He's addressing these who are alive and on the earth at this time, Jews and the Gentiles that are alive on the earth at this time. You keep rejecting Jesus. It's a terrifying way to go. And there will be plenty that do reject Jesus. Now, this abomination of desolation has caused many to look at history and say, well, there was something like this in history, wasn't there? And there was. There was a leader. We've heard his name before. We've talked about his name before. Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century BC. A Syrian king. He was wicked. He was thoroughly wicked. Terrorized the Jewish people and anyone else that got in his way. But he did enter into the temple, proclaim himself as God, and he set up a statue of the Greek god Zeus in the temple. Which Zeus, the Greek god Zeus in Greek mythology, is the god of all gods, the most powerful god. And he sacrificed a sow, a pig, on the altar, which was an abominable to Jews. Couldn't tolerate that. Just desecrated the whole space. Plus him being there and his armies being there with him. And people say, well, didn't this happen? Well, this did happen. That is a prototype for what is going to happen. In small measure, and it's not too small a measure, for what's going to happen. Jesus is talking about a future event. He's talking about a future event. Even at the time of Jesus, that was past. So he's not talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, although that's a prototype. We won't go into it today, but we already have a few years ago. But in Daniel, we can see a picture of the prototype coming. Jesus is talking about something future. Not Antiochus Epiphanes. But we can learn a lot from that. Now, if you want to learn more about what happened at that time as a historical record, you could look into the Apocrypha, to 1st and 2nd Maccabees. 1st and 2nd Maccabees in the Apocrypha. First 2 chapters in 1st Maccabees. But you could read about the Maccabean revolt, its historical accuracy. As a side note, whenever I mention the Apocrypha, I always say we do not accept the Apocrypha as Scripture. That's why in most of your Bibles, the Apocrypha is not in the Bible. It's not part of the 66 books of the Bible, but there are some Christians, some people calling themselves Christians, who have Bibles that have the Apocrypha in it, and they build theology off of the Apocrypha. It's a historical document. It would be like building theology off the Encyclopedia Britannica. No, we don't build theology. We build theology off the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament, the Bible, the 66 books of the Bible. But if you wanted to know something about the atrocities of Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabean revolt, the war that took place in the 2nd century BC that was fresh in the mind of Jesus' disciples, you could go there and you could see how the temple was desecrated. Antiochus Epiphanes sets up that statue of Zeus, and it just offends and terribly infuriates the Jewish people. Jesus is making a prediction, a prophecy, that there will be a future ruler that will do something similar. Okay? Making a prediction about something future. Now, that leads us to number 1 in your listening guide. Some, when they look at these passages, look at these scriptures, they come to the conclusion that the abomination of desolation was the Roman army of the 1st century. I mentioned Titus last week. the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the warfare that took place in the years prior to that. Some of them look at that and they say, well, what is Jesus talking about? Well, he's talking about what it looks like is the Roman army, because we know from history the Romans came in, destroyed the temple, they desecrated the whole city, actually, not only the temple. That's where we're going to land, and that's a troublesome position. That people thinking that is first century fulfillment. Very difficult, and it does us well to think about that just a few moments, because I have just told you that Jesus is describing something that's future. But if there's a significant portion of Christianity and in the history of the church, that when you look these things up on your own in your own study, there are going to be comments about the Roman army. We want to be prepared and think to ourselves, does that make sense? Well, Jesus seems to be talking future. And when he says standing, the word standing, when you see the abomination of the desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing, okay, that means something. Holy place, I've already mentioned a holy place. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Well, that's in verse 16. And so that's led many to think critically about, could it be the Romans that Jesus is talking about here? And the point of that is, whether it's Roman or not, is that it was fulfilled in the first century, and we don't have to think about even some kind of a future tribulation time, because it's all been fulfilled here in the first century. Well, technically, it would be impossible for the Roman army to stand in the holy place. I suppose someone could say, well, as a representative, the general of the armies. Well, okay, kind of adding in here, painting in the picture, a representative. Well, you think about, well, how many representatives? This is a small place, the holy places. Not room for the Roman armies. It doesn't sound like that. And when you read about the Maccabean revolt, and when you read about Antiochus Epiphanes, but then you have that in the background, and then you think about the Romans having come in at that time, after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, the Romans come in, and they're at war in Jerusalem. You can imagine it. Think about warfare in the world that we live in today. They're advancing. They're coming in on Jerusalem. Here they are. I know we have some people that have military experience in the room. Can you imagine that they're just coming in on one side to Jerusalem? Probably they're surrounding Jerusalem. They got it covered on all sides, the Romans. They're not amateurs at this. They probably got it covered on all sides. Jesus says that when you see this abomination in the holy place, not near the holy place, not surrounding the holy place, in the holy place. So that doesn't seem, again, it doesn't seem like that would fit the picture of the Roman armies. And then when we look to the parallel passage in Mark chapter 13, verse 14, won't turn there right now, but the word he is used. Well, that's an odd word to use if you're speaking of an army. He standing in the holy place. But now, as we think about that Roman army and their sophistication in warfare at the time, coming in, leveling everything that's in their sight, orders the command to level Jerusalem, surrounding Jerusalem. When are the people to flee? according to verse 15. When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, then, verse 16, then let those who are in Judea, a very Jewish reference, flee. So we're just adding pieces. We're just adding pieces to the puzzle here. Well, it says when we see the abomination of desolation standing in that holy place, then we're supposed to flee. It doesn't say flee when we're being surrounded. But if we're surrounded, how do we flee? The Roman armies are in control of Jerusalem, the whole area, having encompassed it, surrounded it. And so we're waiting, and we think we've identified that abomination of desolation in the temple, as wicked as it is, and then we're going to flee where? Flee to the mountains. That's outside of Jerusalem. How are you going to get through that line? I don't think going to flee to the mountains. Probably going to be a prisoner of war. If not killed, probably killed. So that, another piece is like, well, if I'm going to say that Roman army is the abomination of desolation, how do I flee? That doesn't really seem to make sense. It seems like it's impossible. It would be too late to flee. Well, Jesus doesn't really mean in the holy place. He meant near or close to the holy place. Well, that gets questionable, because then we're kind of taking out a word where it's kind of convenient and putting in a word where it's kind of convenient. That's kind of difficult. Now, the Jewish historian Josephus, another non-biblical source, but a historian, tells us that the Romans burned the temple. Well, it's kind of hard for the abomination it's kind of hard to have a throne, a stand, somebody standing in the holy place, or maybe flags put up, or maybe the golden eagle of Rome put up in the holy place. It's been burned. How does that work historically? It's a violent situation. Josephus also says that there's some kind of a wall. He doesn't say some kind of, but I'm abbreviating today. Some kind of a wall around, a temporary wall, a wall that is suitable to their military strategy. There's a wall surrounding Jerusalem. How are you going to flee through that? It looks impossible. So all of this, it seems like, I don't think Roman army doesn't seem to make sense here. It doesn't seem to be what Jesus is talking about. And he's not talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, because he's talking something we can see. Jesus says, when you see, well, Antiochus Epiphanes already came, and we just talk about the Roman destruction. That doesn't seem like that would fit. And so it seems certain that Jesus is talking about something future. I hope that helps you, because if we were to look into Romans or Revelation chapter 6 through Revelation chapter 19 and all that terror and all that destruction, and how do we make sense of that? There's a lot of cosmic events and a lot of things happening in Revelation. I don't know if it happened in the first century. Did that happen in history? Well, it helps us to think that, well, we have Matthew 24, and at least we can put that piece in our puzzle, our jigsaw puzzle. Seems like Jesus is talking something that happened in the future, the way distant future, not the future like 30 years after his living, way distant. And that'll help us. If you can come to that conclusion, it has helped me. Now, Jesus says in verse 21, for then, and in your listening guide, I put some red diagonal lines. I hope that's not diagonal lines, they're just lines. Anyway, hope it helps you to see some connection. So when is the when? Well, they go down to verse 21. So then is the when. Then there will be great tribulation. Okay, what about this great tribulation? It might be helpful to know and to look and see in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, so there's a flow. But in verse 21, he says, for then, after this abomination, desolation gets in the holy place, and all this fleeing goes on. And by the way, what he's saying is just hope it doesn't come at an inconvenient time. Being on a housetop doesn't make any sense to us, but in that culture, when your relaxing area, when your family room was on the rooftop, the cool place at night, go up on the rooftop. Pray you're not on the rooftop, because it's going to take too long for you to get down, and that's how fast. Pray you're not on a rooftop. If you're in a field working and you've put your cloak down at the end of the line, like some of the workers do out here in the Central Valley, they'll put their shirt or their coat down at the end of the row, and they continue. Don't go back and get the cloak. There's not going to be any time for you to run back and get that. When you see this happening, well, women who are pregnant and nursing infants, it's just going to be really difficult for them in that particular time. And then the Sabbath, you're very concerned about Jewish law and the Sabbath regulations. The Sabbath, there were regulations on how far you could travel on the Sabbath, but Jesus wants you to go to the mountains. And so just pray that it's not at a time that it's going to make your life's going to be complicated. Pray. Then there will be great tribulation. Here we go. And I underlined it in your listening guides. Such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. As we look at that phrase, it seems to me to be a very important phrase. Not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. It seems very emphatic. In fact, he's speaking very emphatically here. Never will be. Now, when we think about some of the atrocities in the world, well, there's just been barbarism in the history of the world. Our brothers from China can give us some testimony to that, I am sure, of the historical barbarism in China, the widespread millions of people that have been killed. But Jesus says, never will be. Some of us will recall in history those nuclear bombs that were dropped, pretty wicked. But Jesus says, never will be. We think about ethnic cleansing, massacres of people. What do they say? The former century, the 20th century, the bloodiest century there has ever been? Jesus says, never will be. So we'll take him at his word. And that'll help us. That'll help us when we try to reconcile Revelation, but then also try to reconcile that Roman army thing I just mentioned to you. That destruction in Jerusalem was horrific in 70 AD in the first century. But could it possibly Well, if you're a victim of it, it could be nearly as bad as the killing fields. Could it possibly be as bad as that? Could it possibly be as bad as what Stalin did to his people? Could it possibly be as bad as having a nuclear bomb dropped on you? Could it possibly be as bad as the warfare, the ugliness, the death that we have seen in this former century that we're living in, and it's continuing into this century? How are you going to make that be the Roman army? It seems like all of these things that have taken place that we're just historically aware of, it was sure ugly for the Jewish people. But it's hard to reconcile that, put that together. I'm sure you feel some of that tension about actual history and how that first century view could look here. But then when we look to Revelation, it helps unlock some things for us. When we look at Revelation, I invite you to open your Bible to Revelation chapter 6. To Revelation chapter 6. And if we were to look down to verses 7 and 8, the seals are being opened. Verse 3 is the second seal. Verse 5 is the third seal. We go to verse 7. Then he opened the fourth seal. I heard a voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. A fourth. Billions. And then if you just wanted to turn forward, we'll get to some of this later on a future Sunday, but if you want to turn forward to chapter 9, and if we look at verse 13, here again we're looking at this, never has been. Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice of the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, the year, were released to kill a third of mankind. Whoever's living by that point, to kill a third of them. Now that's getting close to Jesus saying, then there will be great tribulation as such as never has been. Matthew 24, verse 21. From the beginning of the world until now, no, never will be. The Romans never did anything like that. No other army in the history of the world has never done anything like that. Kill a quarter of the world's population, and then whoever is left, kill a third of them. That's all to say it looks pretty future to me. So this sign of the end of the age, the abomination has come, and it's an event where God's glory in the temple, that's what the temple is about, the glory of God. God's glory in the temple is overthrown, it's usurped. The sacred character of the temple is overthrown, it's destroyed. Now after Jesus, in the days of the Apostle Paul, in your listening guide, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, the Apostle says, "Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first." That's the rebellion, by the way. We'll dwell on that on another time, but the rebellion, not just general rebellion like we have today. The rebellion at the end of times. The rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness, well, that tips us off to what the rebellion would be. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Well, that's pretty desecrating. that it seems that Paul is looking future. He's looking future. He's going to take his seat in the temple. And then Jesus talking about that, the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, also included that in your listening guide. Hopefully that tips you off to some further study. You have in your listening guide there 26 through 27, but really starting at 24. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression. So Daniel lays out this information, and when we come into verse 26, he mentioned 70 weeks in verse 24, but now he says, and after the 62 weeks, an anointed one, which I would wish that the NIV had actually put Messiah in. Some of you, the translations you're looking at, it does say Messiah. It helps clarify. The word in the original language, Messiah, is used. But anyway, an anointed one in the ESV or Messiah, shall be cut off and have nothing. That's the crucifixion of Jesus. And the people of the prince who is to come. The people of the prince who is to come. Most futurist scholars will look at that and see Roman, in a people of the one to come. Will destroy the city, and that means Jerusalem, and the sanctuary, the holy place. Its end shall come with a flood, and the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. So a lot of interpreters will see that as being, that's the fulfillment. That Daniel's looking towards what actually happened in the first century, the destruction. The people, the anointed one being cut off, that gives us some timing. The Messiah being cut off, killed, crucified. Then the people of the one to come are going to destroy the city. Then verse 27. And he, who's the he? Well, he's the prince to come, spoken of in verse 26. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And a week here refers to 7 years. Make a strong covenant, and he's speaking about Israel here, the people of Israel. If we go back to verse 24, 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city. Speaking about the Jewish people. Daniel's people. Your holy city. And so there's strong covenants being made, and for half a week, 3.5 years, because a week, 7 years, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, very much like Antiochus did. End to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So we don't have time today, but we could look into Revelation chapter 11, verse 2, Revelation chapter 13, verse 5. And they both speak about a 3.5 year period, a 42-month period as well. I'm just pointing you to what I believe is the place that Jesus is referring to. The prophet Daniel has spoken about something, and he says to understand, let the reader understand, which, as I mentioned last week, tells us there's some thinking going to be involved with his disciples and for us as well. There's some thinking. Understand. But it also is encouraging because it is to be understandable. We are to be able to understand it. Something that seems on the surface to be very confusing. So he says this this sign of the end of the age is going to come, and this Antichrist is going to come, and he's going to desolate the temple, and God's honor is going to be overthrown. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with this whole picture being very Jewish, indicating that Jesus is issuing a warning to that community that is living at that time when these things take place. He's issuing a warning. What to do? Flee when you say, don't warm up to these things. This leader is not going to be your friend. When you see this happen, flee. Touched on it last week. Very, very Jewish. Very, very Jewish. It helps us if we see that piece of it along with what we've already considered. God's going to work with the Jewish people somehow. He's going to do a miraculous work. He's going to testify, through them, going to testify to the world. They're going to have an opportunity, those that are remaining, the Bible Revelation calling them earth dwellers. Those on the earth dwellers, are going to have an opportunity to come. Nobody be without excuse. And then the end will fall. And we'll finish with Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. How is this going to happen, Jesus? Now, just so that you're aware, Jesus says that the gospel will be preached in all of the earth. And I know I've asked you to turn to Revelation, so I'll just read it for you from Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So you ought to be aware that some have built their theology, their present day theology, their present day evangelism strategy. We have got to get the message out to the people, or the Lord won't come. Now, are you going to join or not? Let's get it done so the Lord can come. What's wrong with you people? I don't know if Jesus meant that. That does not take away from our responsibility to get the word out, to give the Summer of Joy packs out. All right, Pastor, how's the whole world going to hear about it if we don't do it? Well, I'll tell you how. Revelation chapter 14. Turn in your Bibles. Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give Him glory, because the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." And then another angel comes. How are all of those people in all of those secret places and all of the... I'm not taking away, I don't think you would do this, but don't hear me saying taking away from Bible translation, missionary work, evangelistic work, not taken away from any of that, but we have to have this in our thinking too. How are those people in those remote places, in those hidden away, tucked away places, how are they going to hear? An angel is going to make sure they hear. It's right there in your word, unless you just discount the whole Revelation and ignore it. It's right there. And God's going to take care of it. He expects His people to share the message, to bring the message out, to tell your story. Don't tell my story, tell your story. Don't tell something. It'd be nice to tell the story of Jesus, but tell your story. But in the end, whoever, those earth dwellers, how are they going to hear? God's going to have an angel announcing it. And you know what? There are still going to be people that reject it. How can that be? That is the hardness of a human heart. So if your heart is soft towards Jesus and getting his message out to other people, you have experienced a miracle in your life.